It's kind of 2/3 of the saucer. Okay, why is that important? Because the Roswell crash was also a chevron crash. It was not a saucer, right? If you study the evidence, you find, yeah, that's what was reported, right? And it had certain things underneath which are not normally seen in the saucer. Why is this significant? If you study the bodies, if you study the reports of the bodies in the Roswell crash, they're not the ones that the contactees are reporting, by and large. Almost no reports from contactees are these kinds of aliens. They're not the super, angular-headed, very large, big eyes. Not at all. They're more kind of slightly oriental. They have smaller eyes. They're kind of square-faced. And they're not around anymore. So let's put it together. It's early in this new engagement of the planet after the atom bombs are dropped. Some chevron craft flying aliens are around, and one of them crashes. Implication, technology not as advanced as maybe some of the others. Not so advanced, vulnerable to either a radar interference or possibly a lightning storm or maybe their own miscalculations. And so they crash. Not long after that, they just aren't seen anymore. So try to imagine a situation circa 1947, or between 45 and 47, when there are X number of ETs in our near surround. And decisions are made that now we're going to advance on some sort of a program, a project, a transition, something significant, something major involving the Earth and the extraterrestrial presence. And the more advanced members of this alliance basically say, guys, you need to go, right? This is for the big boys and girls, all right? You're not advanced enough, you don't have the technology, so you've been around, but you have to go. And there may have been others that were told, new game now, and you have to leave. That's something to think about if you think about this. Very quickly, I'll try. I'll tie this in.
This is his hell to have a very short amount of time.
In my view, the Roswell event was the closest we had come to disclosure until last year. In other words, nothing had come close to that. Why? Because after the announcement went out, after the press release went out, reporters were heading towards Roswell. They were literally in cars and trains, and maybe even the odd plane, heading for Roswell. Those cars, trains, and planes were a lot slower back then, a lot slower. And so since they turned the story around in something like 5-6 hours, they had gotten the other press release out before they could get there. Now, if they had not, if they'd been too slow, if there had been a miscommunication or a connection between Ramey and Truman, and they weren't getting their act together and nobody knew what to do, and those reporters had gotten to Roswell, they were going to start interviewing the civilians. They were going to start interviewing everybody they could. And those interviews had gone to record. It would have been over. We'd have had disclosure in July of 1947. But they all turned around and went home because the government got, so we came close. Have we come that close to disclosure before? Not until last year. Last year, we came extremely close to disclosure. Why? Because Paradigm Research Group, based on the work of the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, funding from that, and a political initiative that was run in November of 2014, had broken, finally, the story open after 23 years since it began, and 14 years since the first documents were put up on the net. The story of the connection between the ET issue and the Clinton election team, the Clinton team, which included Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, John Podesta, George Stephanopoulos, Leon Panetta, Mac McClarty, Webster Hubbell, Al Gore, and Bill Richardson, right? And the science advisor, John Gibbons. We finally broke that story open. It started appearing in the newspapers in November of December of 2014. And those stories started building and building. But I pretty much was behind it all, to be honest with you. I'm not, it's just the way it was, right? I mean, I was dealing with the media. My press agent, who I could afford at the time, was dealing with the media. I was up on the Hill having meetings on Capitol Hill so the Clintons would know that I was up there. And so what happened is the reporters that were writing these articles started calling Clinton and Podesta and saying, "What's your comment?" And they had nothing to say. They stonewalled them completely. No comment, nothing. They didn't call them up and say no comment. They didn't answer their emails and phone calls. They were basically confronted with the press, and they realized they could not say anything. Now, as that continued, the pressure grew. They realized that this thing could blow before she made it to the White House, and as a result, they had to do something, but they had to control it. They had to create a trail of breadcrumbs that they could control as much as possible so that they would have this record as part of her statements in the campaign without the story blowing out before she made the White House. And that is why, starting on February the 13th, going all the way to June the 2nd, February 13th, 2015, June 2nd, 2016, and you may have seen some of this, either Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, John Podesta, or Barack Obama actually spoke to the ET issue on 12 occasions. 3 of which were the Jimmy Kimmel Show, you had the Ellen DeGeneres Show, you had the Colbert Show, as well as interviews with the Conway Daily Sun, Politico. 12 times they spoke to the ET issue and went out of their way to make it clear they were serious while she is running for president in a campaign that would cost the Democrats $1.5 billion. And so this thing was ready to blow wide open. And there was nowhere to go, and if they had, disclosure would have come pretty quickly as the media went into what we'll call full frenzy mode. But there was one more element that would require it to blow before the election and make Obama the disclosure president. And that is that during the 36 debates that eventually took place, and forums, there were town forums and interviews, and there were debates. Total was about 36. As you know, we started with 30-some candidates. So you had 30 candidates between the Democrats and Republicans that eventually went through 36 debates and town forums, eventually narrowing down to 2 candidates who then had 3 more debates. They were all hosted by television journalists, by television news journalists, like Stephanopoulos, like Wallace, and so forth, and Megyn Kelly. Some of which were right-wing, some of which were like Fox News, and some of which were the rest, CNN, MSNBC. That's the way we work in here. That's the way we do it. These multi-millionaire television journalists are the ones to actually make the questions. It's made clear that when one of those journalists moderates, say it's Chris Wallace, he has control of the questions. The network doesn't give him the questions. The campaign doesn't give the questions. They decide exactly what they're going to ask. And in 36 debates with 30 candidates, not a single one asked a single question of any of them, including Hillary, about the ET connection that had been written up in 500 mainstream print articles, 130 of which directly referenced me and PRG. I was never called by a single station, right? I'm talking New York Times, Washington Post, New York Daily News, Washington Times, the Times of London, Chicago Tribune. I could go on and on, all of that. And as a result, they got through the debates unscathed and shut up on June the 2nd and never said another thing as they moved towards the inevitable win on November the 8th. By that time, I was already in a source relationship with 42 reporters. Now, what is a source relationship? A source relationship means I'm on a regular, continuing information basis with them. They're on a blind copy list. I'm sending them stuff every 3 or 4 days. I have talked with them for 1-2 hours. 2 of these reporters are multiple Pulitzer Prize winner nominees. And all of them were ready to jump right on Secretary Clinton the moment she won the election. Because now that that's robbed, there was nothing else to block it. And if she was able to withhold them for 70 days, then she would be in the White House and she was going to be the disclosure president. That was the plan all along. We were that close to disclosure. It was there. The amount of media that would have descended. You've seen the frenzy that's going on right now. It would have been bigger than that. It would have been Monica Lewinsky-sized frenzy. And on November the 8th, 4 years of work, huge amount of money, was blown completely to smithereens. History. When she loses the election, it's over. So the advocacy movement at that point is stopped absolutely cold. Like a couple more minutes, maybe two.
How do you guys feel?
Yeah, keep going. Okay, good. I'm almost done. I'll take
I
up.
still don't understand why she can't say anything.
This was the biggest setback in my experience in